Morning, guys. Welcome to Sea Talk. I think we're going to do a quick round the screen welcomes, but I think everyone knows everyone. We're going to start with Natalie.
Hi, I'm Natalie Lightfoot, and I'm a retailer up in Glasgow.
And you trade with
Londis.
Amit Puntambekar, Cambridge retailer, Nisa symbol.
And then we've got a mystery guest on today.
I'm Atul Sodha, Londis retailer in Harefield, and a long-time friend of Chima and these other two.
So, look, I think we're going to have a bit of a debate today of what happened this week that affected our businesses. I think it was a hard budget for all of us, and I think it's going to be really hard for us to digest into our businesses and what we do going forward. I think the biggest impact to us was the national living wage and what is put onto the contribution cost to our business. So I think on that, let's just go straight into it. And I think, Natalie, what do you think to the announcement, and how is it going to affect your business?
Well, to be honest, massively. It's going to change a lot of decisions I'm going to make going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I'm quite a small store, I've got 16 members of staff.
Mm-hmm.
So a rough calculation, it's if I stayed at my current levels of staffing and the hours that everybody does, without changing anything, it would be over £41,000 extra a year for me. So
wow,
it's a lot of money to find. So I've got a lot of. I obviously do online deliveries. That's 40% of my business, like I say in when I'm talking about the business. So it's quite labour intensive.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to need to streamline things, I think, and really reconsider how I'm doing things, because I can't just. It's not something you can just magic up. I have to look at costs. I'll have to look at hours.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot to consider, but also probably looking at a lot of my price mark products as well, because they're probably not delivering the margin that I'm going to need. So yeah, it's a lot of decisions to make between now and April.
And do you think that when the announcement's done, it's happened? I mean, us as independent retailers, because that's what we are, we're family-run independent stores. I don't think the noise really comes out to us, and then our insight, how it impacts us as a family business, because if you work out what we do, we're probably on less than minimum wage for the hours that we do in our stores, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. We are always scared of passing that cost onto our shoppers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is, I don't know, what we do and how we do, and you brought up price mark packs. I think it's really, really now it's time for us to look at what we do and how we deliver in our businesses, right?
Well, I think a call to action on the price marking and the margins there. I think anyone that wants to work with independent retailers need to respect the fact that we need margin. Otherwise, they're not in this either. Do you know what I mean? So let's be very honest about all of this. You know, the cost can't be absorbed. It's got to come from somewhere. Streamlining. Listen, now I understand what you're saying, right? 16 members of staff, the amount of stuff that you do, and the square footage sales you've got. You kind of need that, you know, so you start cutting that back and it's going to start affecting the service level, which is what you built your business on, right? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. That's where it's grown. So
you run yours remotely, right? Natalie's in a store, but you run yours remotely.
Yeah,
how's this going to affect you?
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. You know what? I've been thinking about this, and obviously I'm already at a real kind of skeleton staff basis. I've run a very similar size store to Nat. But my staff take on a lot. I mean, there's 3 there that are mainly there during the day, and then we got two part-timers that come in to do some of the other routines, and then there's me, and I float around, right, or remote. And I'm just thinking that if I'm down to that level and they're doing so much more, how much more can I get them to do before it starts having an effect on their, first of all, their mental health, secondly, on the service level that I want to be unique with. Right, we have a very intensive kind of labor in the fact that we cook every single day, and we do a lot of baking, and there's lots of interaction going on, and people need to be motivated to keep doing that. Right? Yeah. So where do I cut? So I had to think about this, and just recently, this is a weird one, right? So our morning trade over the last few weeks has slowed down a bit. That's because we've got a hell of a lot of workers not at a work site that's close by. That's what I'm assuming. I don't know that for a fact, but would that mean that I open later to save the wage bill? Do you know what I mean? So I've only got so much stuff I can play with before it starts affecting how I am able to deliver what I want to see as a good service. And the other side of it, I think, is even if you look at big businesses where we've stayed at hotels overnight, just recently, there was one member of staff that was checking people in, and then there was no one at the bar or looking after anything else. And if that's already the situation in big corporations, you know, service levels and people's attitude towards what's going on out there in the world, it's a reality, right? So, all right, putting a national minimum wage up, but it has an effect on this end of it, the back door.
Yes.
We're going to have to make tough decisions.
Yeah. And Amit,
I think
sorry, Natalie, go on.
I was going to say that I think that's just about like other places having that sort of knock-on effect. So a lot of people in my area are locally employed. So I think that, you know, if there's not just our businesses that are going to be making these decisions, there's going to be things like hospitality or, you know, cafes and things like that. So that's a lot of my customers. So if they start then losing their job, and employability becomes really difficult because people aren't really going to be hiring, you know, it's just going to be this real knock-on effect. And I think it's actually that sort of thing is going to be quite rapid, not necessarily in our industry, but in others around us, like surrounding us.
Yes.
So that's what worries me, is that my customers then can't afford it. And then if I start to remove price mark products and a little bit of value, that worries me too. Do you know what I mean?
It's like big knock-on effect here.
Spirals, yeah.
Because we are, I mean, even though we're retailers, we're all in hospitality, aren't we? That's what our business is. Yes. I mean, talking to you recently, you took the big plunge of having a good time off this year, didn't you? You had a good holiday. Your view was actually to work on the business rather than actually work in the business, right?
Attempting.
Yeah. I mean, has this changed your view again now?
No, we're still going forward.
Yeah.
So our recruitment's really slow. We do struggle, but we're very specific on the attributes we want to bring in. So there's more pressure on the employers in terms of who we're recruiting. We have to take less risk, and we have to really make sure we get the right people in earlier, because training, getting that attribute wrong can set you back thousands straight off the bat. But it's going to affect who we employ. It's going to affect people with maybe patchy CVs. I mean, we're quite lucky. We're only affected by about £10,000 a year increase. But if you look at that from a turnover perspective, it's around £96,000 of turnover. If we want to stay level, we need to generate.
Yes.
And this is a really interesting way to look at it. So Nat, for example, with a £41,000 increase, if she needs to grow that in terms of turnover, it's over £300,000 plus, 350 plus. And maybe we should talk about our challenges, not just what it's costing us in terms of net impact, but, well, how much turnover do we need to grow to remain stable? And that's a really shocking figure when you turn it on its head and approach it like that.
Paul, there was something interesting said on Question Time yesterday with regard to the net effect from the OBR. That right now we're talking about, was it 20? How many millions was it? How many billion pounds is this supposed to generate in tax increases? 20 something.
22.
22, right? And they said with the effects, because they recognise that obviously growth isn't going to be like mass because of all the issues we've just stated, and the net impact will be about 16 billion. So has the government actually overtaxed us to try and reach their burden, make us feel the pain, and then when, like I say, the jury's out on this for me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but so I heard somebody say something about that they are shooting themselves in the foot, because if with this minimum wage increase, obviously it has then a knock-on effect. It doesn't just affect just the people who are just earning minimum wage. It then provokes then other people who are in other jobs will have that 6.7% increase plus, and that includes all NHS workers. and NHS workers are getting paid by the government. So if they're having to then increase how much they're paying for NHS work, they're sort of shooting themselves in the foot. It's like a big
Well,
round sort
Well,
of.
they're backing that up by saying that they're putting all that money back into the NHS. So net, it kind of goes back in. I
interesting.
was,
Interesting you said that, Natalie, because I had a customer come in yesterday, and she's a nurse, and she says, I said to her, I go, "How are you, Lisa?" She goes, "Absolutely shocking." I'm not going to say the word that she said to me. She goes, "I've just had my back pay on what we should have got with the new rate," and she goes, "Guess what? I've been taxed £1,000, so I've actually lost £600 of my own money." So that's where the government have been really clever. Well, yes, we're going to give you more, but actually we're going to tax you on your back pay as well.
Well, Paul, I was once someone explained the economy to me, and they said, if think of it as a wheel moving, and the faster it's moving, the more we're growing. The slower it's moving, we're obviously not doing so well. And what gets me is that they said that they're going to change. I mean, Labour is saying that everything is about change, and that wheel moving is not going to be any faster because they've kind of hindered themselves from the fact that the disposable income that people didn't have, and now the wage increases are there, it's still going to be the same because you're getting taxed. So they still haven't got that. You know, there's more money that you can play with, but there's actually less disposable income, which is the big issue. And the only reason that people come into us in our stores is because they're fed up and they want a treat or this, that, or the other, right? And if they just don't have the money to get these treats, what happens? Some of the unfortunate people that suffer this as retailers is going to go down to crime. It's just going to create a whole different level of kind of problems that I feel that are already there. That's just going to get exacerbated.
You had a really good point earlier, and I don't think a lot of retailers have thought it through the way you have. Actually, you know, Natalie's £41,000 increase, and I don't think a lot of retailers, and I'll say it again, not many retailers have thought the way you've thought it, is how much more am I have to take in my store? Okay, but where am I going to get that extra trade from? Because as you said, the treats aren't going to be there because people are going to be thinking, oh, I can't go into the store because I haven't got the money to buy them treats. So where do you think we're going to get this growth from that the government think we're going to get it?
There's no. If you look at what's happening in the market, if anything, there's a retraction from our sector. So we're all fighting for less.
Yes.
So and kind of the next step we're going to have to look at is, you know, the guys have mentioned it, but we need more support from suppliers on percentages. But the issue the suppliers are having is the raw cost of goods are going up. So they have their own troubles. But the issue is if we can't sell, then their volumes are going to naturally decline. So there needs to be a conversation between suppliers, wholesale, and retailers to, okay, what do we need to keep our business not just surviving, but how can we thrive? Because we don't want to survive. We don't want to have to work 80, 90-hour weeks. You know, it's inhumane sometimes, some of the work we have to do. So, you know, we need to look at scrimping margin as well.
And do you think that this other thing that she's put out, apprenticeships. So the apprenticeship wage has now shockingly gone up really high. You know, we've always in our business, we've always took on younger members of staff because they're from our community. But then you have to put so much time and effort into training that young member of staff. Do you think that the next generation of people hopefully coming into our industry will now be affected because we'll be thinking differently? We'll rather take someone on with a skill set that can help our business grow rather than we having to put that time and effort into training that next person. So there's actually a knock-on effect to that generation as well, right?
I use very similar kind of technique on bringing younger people into the business because it was easier to pay them, right? Because you don't have to pay them as much. But, you know, I think someone said this on a different forum at one stage. And, you know, with this minimum wage at $12.21, you know, I'm not getting paid that and I'm the boss. You know what I mean? How someone's really got to stand up and say, I am worth this. Because our job is not easy. We know that. It's 24/7. It's always on your mind. Or for a person that's working a 40-hour week or whatever, they need to be on it. And I need to see that when I'm paying that money, I'm getting that return on that investment. And we used to choose, obviously, younger people because we didn't have to pay them as much. But you were giving them something back. You felt good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So I have always employed younger people, but I've always paid them the same. So I've never actually put into the you know, when I just always felt quite strongly about it when I was sort of younger myself, that I always had a strong work ethic. So whenever I was working in a part-time job, I was getting paid a lot less than everybody else. So I always felt when I was going to become an employer, that I would want to pay everybody the same. But yeah, you're right, it is harder. They don't have the experience and things like that. But for me, in my area, it was always harder to find somebody without a past and who's older and has the right experience anyway. And that's just my labour pool that I'm pulling from. But now, like, what am I to do? Because I do agree with what Amit said. I had thought about, I can't just sit here and do nothing because of what I would have to generate to keep going. And I know obviously year on year, if you're a decent business, you should be growing, your sales should be more year on year, but £350,000, it's not going to be like that. And especially with, like, the wholesalers are not going to just sit there and not increase their costs as well to us. If anything, they'll probably reduce our rewards that we get back from them, or make it harder to achieve them, which is counterintuitive, because we might lose sales for people in our area.
Inflation is going to come back in, clearly. I mean, obviously the jury's out on it because we don't know how it's going to pan out in the future. But all of these are things that's giving us signs that people are going to have to put prices up. And if we're having the product coming into us at an increased price and our margins are being eroded, then we're going to have to start to kind of level them up. So there's going to be a hell of a lot of pain. There's no doubt about that, right? And I'm hoping that future generations realize, we understand that money borrowed has to be paid. And we knew that it has to be paid back. And thankfully, we are with a Labour government rather than the Conservatives, because they were flat out of ideas, right? So at least there are a few, and I can't believe I'm saying this, there's a minuscule amount of good ideas I'm hearing from them, because they're totally, there's with over 100 new MPs in the Houses of Parliament. And as we said before, when we've been there, there was a different vibe. So I'm hoping that some of that is going to translate into the future, and we don't have these massive inflationary gains, because if that happens again, we're in deep shit, basically.
Yeah. And then what do you think I mean, there was a couple of other pieces that came out. There's the new levy on vaping. So how do you think, is that good? Is that bad for us? I mean, me for one, I know that these illicit stores that are popping up all everywhere up and down the country, there's not very much being done about them because there's still not enough powers there. I don't think the government, again, have probably communicated or engaged, for the better word, with us independent retailers that understand what's going on in our local areas. Trading standards are very poorly run because they haven't got the support, because there's no council funding for them. So it's all well and putting that levy on the vape, but they haven't actually tackled the problem with fraud, have they?
No.
We're at Parliament on Monday with regards to this again, right? So we just got to keep banging that drum, right? We've got to. I mean, if anything, with more intent, because now it is going to affect everything that we've spoken about here so far. Is just generally, it's going to cost everyone more to do these things, and they're not giving it up. Vape has almost been like a lifeline to a lot of retailers out there.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And if you look at tobacco declining sales as they are, vape was that kind of stopgap in between. But all right, they've extended the amount of time for us to be able to get rid of disposables, but
about 2 months.
There's a lot of that stuff out there, guys.
But do you think that even with cigarettes, with the increase on tobacco, I've seen some tobacco's gone up like £2 a single pack this week. Do you think, Amit, that this is going to encourage more people to go down the illicit route and the black market grow again? But that's a knock-on effect to that trade that we need to pull back into our stores to pay for that £41,000 that Natalie's been hit by.
So the government are creating a bigger illicit market in terms of like roll your own and cigarettes. They clearly want to move away from like combustion smoking, so I completely understand. But they're not pumping enough money into trading standards to for prevention. And now it's so easy. It's cheaper to go to France, £100, bring back a whole suitcase of cigarettes, pay for your trip. You can sell it on Facebook Marketplace because half the price of the legal sellers. So it's almost like you're being punished for following the rules on smoking. When it comes to vape, I can understand the duty coming in, and that's completely fine. The wider problem is it's not illegal to import the Chinese stuff. And the real crux of the matter on vape is that I could, for example, import a lot of illegal stock. That's legal for me to do. I just can't sell it.
Yes.
And until we stop the illegal import, until we stop the legal import of these products, that vape market is already 33% illicit. And the government are going to make some really tough decisions on flavours going forward. Now, if the government decide to ban flavours, what's going to happen? The whole legal market is going to collapse.
Yes.
And the illicit market is going to completely take over. And I don't really think if the MPs were aware of how the illicit was coming in, I think there's a bit of broken knowledge on the vape market, because it's insane that this is allowed to proliferate. Because again, the good sellers are being punished.
Yes.
And if you want to do illicit, you're going to make more money. That it's only a civil fine. It's not a criminal fine, or it's not a criminal issue. So, we want to incentivize good behaviors, but it's almost like the government are disincentivizing these behaviors.
They're being so basic, though. They want to get rid of. Obviously, I'm assuming, and I'm right here. They want to try to get rid of the flavors because they think it's appealing to children, right? But yet, again, I know you said that trading standards don't have, a lot of funding behind them, but you can report people for underage selling, and my staff members get so fed up with shops on my street that are actively. I've watched them through their shop window selling. I banged on the window and I'm like, "What are you doing?" They're in their school uniform. The guy doesn't care.
Correct.
And he gets reported. Trading standards turns up. I get a visit. So do they, and nothing happens. Absolutely nothing happens.
Well, you've seen the work, Natalie, you've seen the work that we did in Coventry, right?
Yeah, and that's why I reached out.
And I'll take my hat off and I praise JTI for listening to me. And actually, they just listen to me. They listen to the voice of us retailers, and they actually made their own point of doing something in Coventry that day. And they did 32 shops, right? I still don't know if trading standards have picked up on the good work that JTI did. So why should us as a retailer put our life on the risk and go and do that work for the government? So, when our trade is only now going to get hit harder when this comes in, right? Because, you're right, it's not going to go away. The black market is going to get bigger. These illicit stores that are opening up, they're doing it for a reason, because they know they can get away with it. And it's going to hit even more. So if that consumer's not coming into us for that Lost Mary blueberry, for example, they're going to go over there to that shop and get it, and they'll get their snacks at the same time. So that's a bigger impact to us.
Yeah. But why are the vape manufacturers, etc., not coming to the table and kind of supporting this or supporting us in kind of, the way that the tobacco companies did? It just feels really kind of disconnected totally, because all of the responsibility is on us as retailers to get rid of disposables. Yet none of these manufacturers who are churning out tons and tons of this stuff that's supposedly going to affect it environmentally, which is the reason they want to get rid of disposables, but none of them are being held to account.
Well, it goes back to Amit's point, doesn't it? Because Amit can import what he wants from China legally. And are these brands just from China? And I'm not blaming them, because maybe they don't understand the legal system.
They're fulfilling a need, aren't they?
They're fulfilling a need. And it's a problem. But this then goes on to a bigger problem where we've all been hit by masses of losses on theft. Do you think now that this is going to only increase in our stores?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Massively so.
That's what I'm saying about, people are struggling to find jobs, and they find themselves, anybody has a major life incident and losing their job and being the main breadwinner can have such a knock-on effect to people's mental health. It's about, they'll choose thieving over to survive. And if any of us were in the same situation, you can't. I know we get frustrated because we're the ones that are suffering from the people thieving from us and shoplifting, but it's sometimes it's about a choice, and if they really feel backed into a corner, then of course they're gonna make those opportunist choices, and make a bad judgment in that moment. So it's going to increase. That's the worry. That's why we're all so worried. That's why we've all sort of listened to this budget and feel so frustrated, because it has such a cascade effect on so many things.
Yes.
And the obvious thing is that if we're not able to employ as many people because we're going to struggle with the NI contributions and the minimum wage increase, then how do you find security for your workers? If you haven't got stock in the store.
That's the other reason, is I need people to be able to be on the shop floor. They can't just all be serving and picking deliveries. I need somebody on the shop floor, watching people as well. So
almost goes to, I was in a meeting the other day with some retailers, and they're saying some run it on one person, and that's that family member in store, right? Because they just can't afford to employ anyone. Some of the big groups, if they've just got an off license, they employ that one-on-one.
How they getting away with that with licensing, I don't know. But look, at the end of the day, you're putting yourself at risk when there's less people in store, right? Without a doubt. And we're being forced into these corners. And what we need to realize is that whilst you might have three of us retailers on here that are slightly more progressive, and we're out there and doing different stuff, there's a hell of a lot, like you said, if you want to call it, for the want of a better word, the mom and pop shops that are run with one person. What are they supposed to do? And this is going to have an effect on the landscape, because at the end of the day, if these people decide to call it a day, that's a gap in that community then all of a sudden. Because we know what we do in our communities, regardless of the quality of the store. People are still going in there and interacting even with that one person, and that's lost. We lose that fabric of retail in that sense. Do you know what I mean? It's scary. I'm hoping that a lot of this stuff that manufacturers, everyone are gonna really realize that you can't be putting prices up, because we're gonna have to relatively do the same, and we need to kind of all work together to try and see that this isn't so detrimental to our trade. And then coming up with different ideas. I would suggest that more and more of us need to get more involved with brands and get more stuff out there and highlight exactly what we do and show what worth we have as individual stores within our communities, within our industry. So there is a little bit more kind of positivity about where we're all going to move forward, and we may come across the next big thing, and we're all getting on it. Do you know what I mean?
So I'm going to go and ask everyone one tip on what could be done. I'm going to start with you and ask, what do you think the government should be doing for us?
Where do we start? Do you know what? I think the targeted relief on NIC was a really good idea, actually, but it didn't go high enough. So they've supported a certain scale of employer, but the problem is, with the way the economy is now, it doesn't really go enough. So if they'd increased that threshold of allowance to like £20,000, for example, that would have gone a lot, really, really far away, especially in the service sector. So that's kind of on NIC. And to be honest, what I really want to see is a real good discussion on vape, like an actual knowledgeable discussion on vape, understanding the impact of legislation on the wider market, and making sure, because Britain has some of the best regulations. So let's make Britain the best place to produce and to sell vape. Let's stop all the illicit stock coming into the country. Let's be proud. Let's be proud to be British again. Let's have an industry that we can be proud of, and with strong regulations.
Good point, Natalie. Our wholesalers.
What can our wholesalers do? Well, I think I know that they're going to sit there and they're going to panic over their own situation. They're going to look at their own bottom line first. But I think if they think a bit more outside the box and actually work with us, to really think about, like, plan out what it would be like for their retailers, what the impact is for them, and where they can look to support, where they will then gain. Maybe look at it like Amit's way. What would they need to have coming in to be able to cover what they're going to be facing in their warehouses, because obviously that's going to be where their main impact is going to be, area of impact. So yeah, to look at where they can look to support us so that we can still drive the volume, for them to be able to generate those sales. But they need to have more open conversations. I'm so surprised that it's taken so long for so many wholesalers to sit down with retailers and actually listen. A lot of suppliers are doing it now and seeing great benefit from actually seeing what's happening on the front line and stop assuming what we do, and think that they know best. I'm not saying we do, but just somebody once said to me, you have two ears and one mouth, like, listen before you speak. So yeah, I think they should do that.
And do you think they should help retailers with, I just really like Amit's point that he made earlier about how much more trade each of us need to take in our stores to sit down with us and say, look, you've got 12 members of staff, this is what it's costing you, this is what we think you need to take more, this is how we're going to help you get there.
Yeah. And speak now, right? Like, you've got this time between now and April, and there's a lot of people that do the wait and see approach, and that doesn't work. So like, to get all the retailers if they're a wholesaler, all the retailers under their symbol to think about that really actively, like push their BDMs to sit down with them and proper one-on-one support, so that they can think now and take action now rather than later on. Because I feel that way with, obviously up in Scotland we've just had MUP for the second time, and again I feel as if that was like left to the last minute, not to forward plan what needed to happen to get everything in place. So the news is now, get everybody thinking and talking about it and seeing and coming up with a plan, because things don't happen overnight.
Yes. And I think that leads nicely into that. So look, we both work strongly with a lot of brands, and are never ever not one of the brands that we work with, because they listen to us, they help us, whether it is with something in our store, great work that Natalie did over the weekend with a Halloween event. That all comes together by the brands that we work with, right? What do you think brands now, especially around P&P, and I know they're governed by what wholesalers do in how that price comes to us, do you think there needs to be more conversation now with brands, with retailers and wholesalers together to look at probably what is the right range, more around advice like category? And I'll go back to some of the great brands we work with, they're doing that already, but how do we get that out now to the wider retailers say out there?
It's very similar to what Nat said, that the conversation is now, right? All these changes are happening. We know what's happening. It's happening in April. I would suggest that we put a call to action to all of those brands out there that are not doing the activity.
Yes.
And come to the table and see what we can deliver for you. Because there's a hell of a lot of us up and down the country that are capable of doing so much more. And the thing about this is, earlier Nat saying that, why is it that the wholesaler doesn't come to the retailer and talk about this stuff? We need to join. We're the ones that join the dot. We're the ones in the middle that have the feeling of the consumer coming into our store, and that is worth so much to any brand out there. So if we call to action all of those different categories in our stores that are not doing these, or they're not getting behind us, or we don't understand it, they need to use the insights that are out there, come to the table, because the consumer, what they're feeling. If that insight is fed back in to these brands, and the brands can then come to us with an action plan, and we can implement it, and then add our bits and make it unique to ourselves, right? And I would just say that there's so many categories in our store, isn't there? We're talking about Snack at the minute is that we're getting loads of support with. Soft drinks we're getting loads of support with. Confetti we get loads of support with. What happens to all the other, laundry, for instance? Years ago we were working with P&G. Where are they right now? All of some of the frozen products out there. Ambient grocery where we could be, helping our communities with healthier food, even somehow, whatever. And those kind of sustainability and health and everything falls on the back burner when people are struggling out there, and we still need to keep that at front of house, as a thought process on how we can work with our suppliers or brands to be able to put that message across. And there's so many out there we can approach. So I'm hoping when this goes out on LinkedIn, I'm hoping a load of these brands that are maybe not doing enough step up.
It's us, our independent convenience stores throughout the time of COVID that we help communities get through. And I think our stores are they're the lifeblood for a lot of communities. For Mrs. Smith, that's her only place she's going to go and talk to someone in that day. And I think there's a big impact out of this, and we need to focus on our businesses. It's really hard, but if we do start letting people go, then conversations will disappear, won't they?
And Paul, being at Parliament on Monday again, I'm going to really gauge the feel of what the MPs are like from when we were there with the ACS a little while back, because there was a different vibe. The changes are happening, the budget's there, the jury's still out as far as I'm concerned, because we don't know how this is all going to manifest. We're going to have to make a load of difficult decisions, as we've just spoken about, right? But it's going to be interesting to see what their attitude and how they're feeling when you go into Parliament again. And maybe report that back to you guys,
Cool. Well, thank you. I think it was a good discussion today. I think we should pick this up again at some point to see how we're getting on within our businesses, or do you know what our friends are doing as well? How's it affecting them? Because I think this is a big thinking now for all of us and what we do in our businesses. So, for me personally, thank you.